You know, every time I throw on the face camera, it occurs to me that I have abhorrent posture that I am going to clearly pay for once I hit my 40s. So, that'll be fun in the next decade. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is we are here to talk about the Pokemons. And you know what? We are going to be hitting up a big one today because we are talking about not just Necrozma, but we're talking about its base form as well as both its Dusk main form and its Dawnwings form. And why are we talking about Necrozma? Well, GoFest just went by this past weekend, and Necrozma was the big ticket Pokemon in the raids. I did a lot of Necrozma raids over the course of the weekend, and this might be a secret, it might not. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, but I get a lot of my restricted Pokemon for Scarlet and Violet up through Pokemon Go, so there's going to be plenty of Necrozma teams coming in the future as soon as my transfer energy builds up. Yeah, we're going to be transferring up some Necrozmas. But anyways, I thought it would be fun to talk about Necrozma and its two fusion forms, and let's jump right on into that. Okay, so the way how it works for Necrozma is in its base form, it is a legendary Pokemon with a base stat total of 600 points across the board, breaking down to 97 base HP, 107 attack, 101 defense, 127 special attack, 89 special defense, and 79 speed. Necrozma originally got the signature move of Prismatic Laser. This is a base 160 power psychic type attack that essentially leaves Necrozma immobile. So in other words, Necrozma got the Dialga treatment. It got a signature move that renders it unable to move, and similar to Dialga's Roar of Time being blocked completely by fairies, Necrozma's Prismatic Laser is completely blocked by a Dark type, so all of that power could be really great, or it could be miserable if you run into a Dark type, and since Incineroar is a prevalent Pokemon, that could be a little bit of a problem. So in the change between Sun and Moon to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, we ended up seeing Necrozma getting a second signature move in the form of Photon Geyser. Photon Geyser is a base 100 special psychic type attack that does damage based off of whether the Necrozma's attack stat or special attack stat is higher. And it also has the added effect of ignoring abilities, which is great because if you hit a sturdy Pokemon for some major damage, you can just straight up knock them out instead of having them survive. You run into a Mimikyu, no disguise for you. Bye-bye, Mimikyu. So, Photon Geyser is great because that was meant to factor into Necrozma's new upgrade from Sun and Moon to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and that is Necrozma Dusk main as well as Necrozma Dawnwing. So basically, Necrozma throws on some polymerization action and attaches itself to Solgaleo and Lunala. In the Dawnwings form, Necrozma's HP stays the same at 97, its attack goes to 113, defense up to 109, special attack up to 157, special defense up to 127, and its speed goes to 77. Now the main difference here between Dawnwings and Duskmane is the physical counterpart to Dawnwings' special stats. So basically we have 157 attack and 127 defense on the Duskmane with 113 special attack and 109 special defense. Now I kind of wish the 113 and 109 was a little bit switched for both of those stats. Like I wish Duskmane had the 113 in its special defense and then the 109 in its special attack, and then Dawnwings having 113 in its physical defense instead of its attack, but alas, that is what Necrozma gets for it. And also, the nice thing here too is both Duskmane and Dawnwings are a base stat total of 680, which is relatively nice. And then as far as Necrozma's ability goes across the board for all three forms, it is Prism Armor. Prism Armor makes it so that the user of the ability receives only 3/4 of the damage from super effective attacks, which is really nice at the end of the day, especially since Necrozma's typing is a little bit all over the place as far as that goes. basically we have a little bit of a change here. One of these three typings is not like the other. So as far as base Psychic typing goes, for base Necrozma, we resist fighting and Psychic while being weak to Bug, Dark, and Ghost. And then Dawnwings, being Ghost Psychic, has 2 immunities to fighting and normal. It resists poison and psychic, and then it has 2 4x weaknesses. Go big or go home, I guess. So it has 2 4x weaknesses to dark and ghost. And then we get to Dusk main, which is a steel psychic typing. And this is a phenomenal typing. It's a really, really good defensive typing, which I am very happy about. It has an immunity to poison. It has a 4x resistance to psychic. It resists dragon, ice, fairy, normal, flying, rock, grass, and steel, while only having 4 super effective weaknesses to itself with dark, fire, ghost, and ground. So Duskmane definitely has a very, very good defensive typing. So it doesn't really need to rely on Terra, but it can definitely benefit from Terra. Whereas Dawnwings is really nice too, because it does have the immunity to Fake Out, but it does have the 4x weakness to both Knockoff and Astro Barrage. So Astro Barrage coming off a Shadow Rider could be really bad. So Dawnwings, when you look into some Terra options, you might want to consider the Shadow Rider matchup for that. And then similarly, if you wanted to run base Necrozma, Terra would probably be for the best as well. Maybe going into a pure steel typing or maybe a grass typing could be really nice on the base Necrozma. So aside from their ability, one thing that all 3 Necrozmas share is their low speed, with the base being 79 speed, and then Duskmane and Dawnwings having 77 speed, which means they could benefit from having Trick Room, since Trick Room does invert the speed stats. So the slower the Pokemon is, the more likely it's going to go first at the end of the day. And Necrozma has the potential to be really bulky thanks to Prism Armor, reducing the amount of damage it takes from super effective hits. And it also helps too that both Duskmane and Dawnwings are relatively bulky in their respective strengths for their defenses. Duskmane has really, really good physical bulk, while Dawnwings has great special bulk at the end of the day. And if you wanted to augment them a little bit further, you could throw a Psychic or Grassy Seed on one of these Pokemon. Like, for example, if you wanted to pair Dawnwings, or not Dawnwings, sorry, Duskmane, I'm going to mix these up a lot, just like I did over the course of GoFest. But anyways, if you wanted to pair Duskmane with an Indeedee and then throw a Psychic Seed on it, you could get a special defense stage. So right there, having the Psychic Terrain would also prevent priority moves from targeting Duskmane. You would get a +1 special defense boost, and you can go from there. If you wanted to throw Rillaboom next to Dawnwings, you could throw a Grassy Seed onto Dawnwings. Dawnwings would get a physical defense boost, which means Dawnwings can go incredibly hard right there. When I did my Lunala video, I threw Grassy Seed on Lunala and Calm Mind on it, and Necrozma Dawnwings can do the exact same thing, which could be amazing. So let's jump back over to the base form for a quick second here. Necrozma has a lot of great setup moves at its disposal. Calm Mind is probably the best one for it, since it raises its special attack and special defense. Both base Necrozma and Dawnwings would definitely benefit from having their special attack and special defense heightened. Not so much on Duskmane, but you know what else Necrozma gets access to? It gets access to Sword Stance. So right there, it has a means of increasing its attack 2 stages, and it also gets access to Dragon Dance. Dragon Dance raises your attack 1 stage and your speed 1 stage as well. Now this is not going to be the greatest on base Necrozma, but on Duskmane, this could be really handy. So you can choose to set up Necrozma however you want, whether you go for a Calm Mind on a special attacking set for either base Necrozma and Dawnwings. You can go for a Sword Stance for a physical set on base or Duskmane, and then you can go for Dragon Dance on Duskmane, which could be really nice. And plus, Necrozma being able to get a speed boost means that you could have some fun shenanigans at the end of the day. Now, you're probably going to want to run the Trick Room, but Sword Stance could be really fun. You don't really see base form Necrozma in battle, but what could be funny is, depending on what setup move you want, you could have the Photon Geyser. We're going to take Prismatic Laser out because Prismatic Laser just a little bit too risky, but If you wanted to run a special set, you can maybe run Dark Pulse and Photon Geyser right there. Dark Pulse has some great chances to make the target flinch. Photon Geyser is really nice. You could even run Expanding Force instead. Expanding Force turns into a spread move on Psychic Terrain, and it also gets a 50% boost in power. Not to mention, Psychic Terrain also gives it a 33% boost for when the user is grounded on the Psychic Terrain. So getting that nice natural Psychic boost is going to be relatively handy. So if you wanted to, you could run Dark Pulse, Expanding Force, and Trick Room. You could call it there with Protect by chance. If you wanted to, you could be a little bit braver and you could run Power Gem. Power Gem doesn't have a bonus effect, but it is nice rock type damage, so you can hit fire types for super effective damage. You can hit flying types. I'm fairly certain you can get Thunderbolt. No, you can't get Thunderbolt. I'm wrong. But you do get Flash Cannon. Flash Cannon could be nice as well for hitting rock types that would be otherwise neutral to Dark Pulse and Expanding Force. So you could use Flash Cannon. Flash Cannon would also hit Psychic, or not Psychic, Ice types. It would hit Ice types. I don't know why Psychic popped into my mind there. But anyways, you could run the Flash Cannon right there. If you wanted to get around some pesky grass types, you could run Heat Wave. If you wanted to pair Necrozma with a Throat Spray, it does get access to Hyper Voice. So Hyper Voice would naturally give you a +1 boost to your special attack if you had the Throat Spray equipped, so that could be handy. Necrozma also gets Iron Defense, so if you really wanted to make it bulkier, you could go for the Iron Defense to get a +2 defense stat, and this could also be... I don't know how you would fit it onto a Dawn Wings, but this would actually be kind of hilarious if you did have the Iron Defense. And then two moves that I want to point out that are going to be really nice, especially for Dawn Wings and Duskmane: Moonlight and Morning Sun. Both of these moves here increase your HP, and the weather will determine how much HP you get back. If you have the sun on the field, these moves will give you significantly more HP. I'm fairly certain without the sun, you recover half of your HP in clear weather. The rain, the sand, and the snow, you get something like closer to 25% back because they hinder the view of the sun and the moon. And then when Sunny Day is active, you get a lot more HP back. I think it's something like 75%. I don't run these moves typically, but they are going to be really nice moves if you wanted to run them on your Duskmane Necrozma or your Dawn Wings Necrozma. On base form Necrozma, probably not the best idea. And then you could also run Meteor Beam for a special attacking option as well, since you could slap a Power Herb on it, and then that way Meteor Beam no longer takes 2 turns to charge, so you would get a special attack boost and then immediately fire. This could be great for getting Incineroars off of the field, especially if they're not expecting the Meteor Beam off of the base form Necrozma, so you could do that. You tend to see Meteor Beam on Dawn Wings, so Incineroars might terrestrialize away from their fire typing, but I digress. You could still potentially punish them with a Meteor Beam. And then if you wanted to, you could also potentially run a physical set. Like, this thing doesn't have a terrible attack stat, and thanks to Swords Dance and Dragon Dance, you can make it fairly usable. So on the physical side, Necrozma gets Earthquake, which is a fairly notable move. It gets Knockoff since it would get a 50% modifier for removing the item on the turn that you do that. You do get access to Psychic Fangs, which is a great means of dealing with screens, and plus they also bypass the effect of said screen, so you could have that. You get access to Rock Slide, so you have a nice chance to hit both targets, make them flinch. Depending on if you're in Trick Room or not, you could potentially get that flinch. You have Shadow Claw for some physical ghost type coverage, and you get access to X Scissor, which could be used to hit dark types for super effective damage, so it's not the worst thing imaginable. And then the other thing too is, if you wanted to, you could maybe double up on some boosting moves. Like, maybe say you wanted to run Iron Defense to raise your defense 2 stages. We take Trick Room out, we throw Calm Mind there, so now you have a means of boosting both your special defense and your physical defense. kind of wish this thing got access to Cosmic Power, but it does not. If it had Cosmic Power and Nasty Plot, this would be insanely wild, but it doesn't get access to Cosmic Power or Nasty Plot, so you do have to maybe consider running Iron Defense, Calm Mind to pull this off. But Necrozma does get access to Stored Power, so Stored Power, it starts off incredibly weak with a 20 power, but for every stat boost you get, you go up plus 20 power, so a +2 off of an Iron Defense would put you from 20 to 60 right there. Similarly enough, a Calm Mind would also put you up from 20 to 60. So if you start stacking some Calm Mind and Iron Defense boosts, your Stored Power is going to get out of hand really quickly. So you could have that if you really want it to be insanely wild and just be Dark-type Father. You could throw the Dragon Dance to get a speed boost onto it and go from there. I wonder if... do you get Trailblaze? You don't. Trailblaze would have been the perfect solution there, because then you would have had a means of hitting Dark types. But main point, it could be funny. You could have the Stored Power, Calm Mind, and Iron Defense working right there. You could also throw on either the Morning Sun or the Moonlight there, just to get back some HP. So you could do that for base form Necrozma. So it's a thing. You don't see it very often, and honestly, I do think this thing is more viable than base form Kyurem, so just putting that out there. Anyways, let's move on to the other two forms. So a quick thing to make a note of too for the fusion forms of Necrozma is since they are fused to Solgaleo and Lunala, Necrozma gains access to their signature moves of Sunsteel Strike from Solgaleo and Moongeist Beam from Lunala. Both of these attacks are great since they ignore the abilities of other Pokemon, so you can get some pesky abilities out of the way, render them null and void with either Moongeist Beam or Sunsteel Strike and do some major damage. For example, Ogerpon Cornerstone has been seeing a lot more usage lately, so you could just absolutely obliterate that with a Sunsteel Strike. No sturdy for them. Goodbye. And plus, since Photon Geyser also does that, you could double up on it, but you might want to be a little bit careful depending on which form that you are running. For example, if you are running Necrozma Dusk main, if you wanted to run Sunsteel Strike and Photon Geyser, you would definitely need to forego a move slot to have a third damaging move. In this case here, I have Earthquake because you are going to have a little bit of a harder time dealing with opposing Necrozma Dusk main since it's going to resist both Steel and Psychic. So if you have the Earthquake right there, you can hit them for some super effective damage. And while Prism Armor would get in your way just a little bit, you could run a Sword Stance to boost up your attack stat and go from there. On top of that too, if you didn't want to double up on Sunsteel Strike and Photon Geyser and run something else, you could still run a third damaging move. I really like the idea of having the Sunsteel Strike, so we'll just remove Photon Geyser for a moment. Necrozma does get that knockoff, so knockoff would be really good since it can remove some items and just absolutely start tearing your opponent's teams apart, since you can nullify the abilities with the Sunsteel Strike and just bypass them. You can use knockoff to remove items. You can get a power boost from Sword Stance. You can go for Earthquake just for some good damage. You can slap a Clear Amulet on this thing here to make sure that Intimidate users such as Incineroar, Landorus Therian, they just do not get the attack drop into you. You don't have to worry about moves like, say, Parting Shot off of the Incineroar. You do still have to worry about screens, but the Sword Stance will help reduce the defensive support of your opponents. If you want to do that, you could run Terra Fire on Dusk main specifically to make sure you don't get burned. And now you basically have your bases checked for making sure that this thing's power output isn't going downhill. If you wanted to still run the Sword Stance, as far as your base attack goes without any investment, you're sitting at 177 attack, so it doesn't take that much investment right here to hit 190. It only takes 100 EVs on a neutral nature. If you wanted to run an adamant nature, well, you're already at 209 with that 100 EVs, so if you want to go max attack, you hit 229. Sword Stance is going to make this thing go incredibly wild. But here's the thing too, if you wanted to run for speed and you wanted to throw a Jolly Nature onto Necrozma, you're still getting a huge attack boost every time you run Dragon Dance, because even at a +1, you're still benefiting quite a bit. So if you want to run Dragon Dance, go for the speed mode. With max speed, you hit 141 right here. Now, one Dragon Dance unfortunately isn't quite enough to get you to outspeed Shadow Rider. It breaks down to being 211.5, and since they round the decimal down instead of up, you're effectively sitting at 211. So if you wanted to, you could just take that one extra point down to 140. A Dragon Dance will put you up to 210 at +1. If you get a second Dragon Dance, which should reasonably be feasible, thanks to Prism Armor and potentially redirection support from some partners, you can double your speed at +2. Then you're sitting at 280, meaning the only real things that are outspeeding you are outside of like Tailwind and Scarf antics is basically speed boosting, max speed, Iron Bundle, and Fluttermane. So that could be really, really handy to know at the end of the day. So you could take the remaining 2 points, or rather the remaining 12 EVs, go up 2 points into your HP, or you could go 4, 4, and 4 to get an extra point into both defenses and your HP. You'd be sitting at 173 with a max attack Necrozma right here. You're at 209. If you just rounded down just to get an even number at 208, a Dragon Dance right there at +1 attack is giving you a 50% boost. So you're sitting at 104 right there. So if you wanted to try to get a little bit of speed investment into, or I guess a lot of speed investment, you could have something like this. You could go up to 174 for your HP, just have a tiny little bit of bulk. That could be a thing. But if you didn't want to run speed and you wanted to go slow, you could take that Jolly Nature out, run a Brave Nature to get that extra attack boost, and then look into your HP and your defenses. You could do something like this. Now, the one thing to make note of is because there's 4 stats right here trying to get boosted, you're optimizing your EVs if you only invest into 3 of them. So maybe you go 197 for your HP. You have the 228 for your attack. We take this extra point out of our special defense and then just invest the rest into defense to bring us up to 156, or we take all those out and run into our special defense to bring us up to 138. Some coaching partners next to Duskmane could just make sure that Duskmane gets the attack and defense boosts that it needs as well. So you could have that. You could pair Gouging Fire with this with Howl. Screamtail would be really nice too, because a booster energy Screamtail could get you your screens and your Howl up, so long as you don't run into Prankster Taunt. You could have a very, very good time boosting up Necrozma that way. So if you're not running the speed, you could take the Dragon Dance out. You could go back to Swords Dance, or what you could do is you could run the Trick Room right here, and now you have a really bulky Trick Room setter. So that could be really nice, and plus Sunsteel Strike can still hit Calyrex Ice Rider for super effective damage, so long as they don't terrestrialize. You can slap away a Clear Amulet with knockoff. And the nice thing about Sunsteel Strike and Earthquake is Calyrex Ice Rider do like to run Terra Fire, so if they terrestrialize into a fire type, well, you can just hit them with an Earthquake. That could be really nice. So if you run the Sunsteel Strike and Earthquake, you could take knockoff out and run the Swords Dance too. Maybe you have a Fake Out user next to Necrozma. Your opponent thinks they're going for Fake Out. You Swords Dance instead of go for a damaging attack, and now you are faster than the Ice Rider outside of Trick Room. If they try to set Trick Room and they don't get it, great. Now you have the Earthquake to outspeed them, you have the Sunsteel Strike, and then you're playing a game of chicken to see who's going to pop their Terra. Now let's talk about Dawnwings here. Dawnwings can run a couple of different options. It can run Meteor Beam, Power Herb to get a special attack boost, like I mentioned when I was talking about the base Necrozma. You could run the Trick Room on this thing to get the Trick Room up, and then you don't have to worry about getting outsped by the likes of Shadow Rider, and then you can now threaten a Shadow Rider with a Moongeist Beam. The fact that Necrozma does get Flash Cannon could be really nice, and Shadow Riders do like to run Terra Fairy, and a lot of Pokemon in general like to run Terra Fairy, so Flash Cannon wouldn't be the worst thing imaginable. If you wanted to and just not have the Trick Room, and run a Trick Room setter next to Necrozma, what you could do here is you can throw a Calm Mind on it, and now you can get a special attack and special defense boost. Since the Power Herb only works once per battle, you could run, say, like a Grassy Seed so that you're getting a defense boost up if grassy terrain hits the field, or even electric seed. Like Miraidon is still a thing. It's a little bit more flexible to run the grassy seed over the electric seed, since you're only allowed one restricted legendary in Reg G. So if you run a grassy seed on Necrozma, have a Rillaboom on your team, you can get that physical defense boost right there. So if you just had that one extra point right here, half of 130 is 65. You're sitting at 195 defense at a +1 thanks to the Grassy Seed, and Rillaboom could be really handy since you can go for Fake Out with the Rillaboom to try to get something dealt with. Necrozma can click the Calm Mind, get a +1 into its special attack and its special defense. I almost said physical there, but anyways, you can go for the special attack and the special defense boost with Calm Mind. Rillaboom or even an Incineroar could go for Fake Out, and now you're getting really, really scary at the end of the day. If you're not running Trick Room, then just throw the extra point into your speed so that you're optimizing your EVs for outside of Trick Room, and then invest more into your bulk and your special attack. So we'll throw a Modest Nature here onto the Necrozma, and then we have the one extra point into our defense. We hit 204. If we wanted to, we could even bring this down to, like, say 199. We can run into our special attack, maybe bring us up to 220 at 180, since that is a nice EV bump where we get the extra point, and then we could run more special defense investment right here, so we can go up to 161. We just have that working in our favor. So at 98 speed with Tailwind, we are fast enough to outspeed Landorus Incarnate. So there is that. And just out of curiosity, just before we get into the other Pokemon that I was thinking that could be really good teammates for it, let's just check something with Ogerpon right here. So we'll just bring up the Teal Mask since their stats don't change. And I don't feel like I get to talk about Teal Mask Ogerpon a lot. A max speed Ogerpon with a Jolly Nature at 178 is what we're going to have right here. So depending on, say, the Dawnwings right here with 98 speed, what we could potentially see is with Tailwind up, that 98 doubles to 196, so you could outspeed the likes of Ogerpon, well, just Ogerpon in general. So having that one extra speed point with Tailwind would ensure that you're faster than it. So there's that. At the end of the day, if you wanted to run, say, the Meteor Beam, this would just absolutely blow up the Heartflame Ogerpon. If you wanted to run, say, Leftovers just to get back a little bit of HP, this thing could get really bulky as well. Maybe you don't run quite as much special defense investment and you run a little bit more physical defense investment to just get around that. That could be an option as well. So you could have that for the Dawnwings Necrozma. Now, one thing that is a little bit disappointing for Dawnwings is it doesn't get access to Moonblast, so having Terra Fairy Terra Blast could be a good way of punishing Dark-type Pokemon, so there is that. So unlike Duskmane, where Sunsteel Strike and Photon Geyser kind of get in their way for dealing with opposing Duskmanes, Dawnwings doesn't have that problem. Dawnwings can hit itself for super effective damage in a very big way thanks to Moongeist Beam. So you could run both of them if you wanted to. And then as far as another option goes, though, in case you didn't want to run the Photon Geyser, you could run the Expanding Force, and then you just have a nice spread option, and then you have the Moongeist Beam as well. As I mentioned, Flash Cannon could be really nice, and then Heat Wave could be a really nice spread option on Dawnwings. Maybe you still just want to run Photon Geyser and Moongeist Beam. You totally could do that. You could throw the Moonlight on here just to get back some HP, and now you have a really, really bulky armored bat that can heal up itself while doing major damage to the opponents. Now, one thing to keep in mind too about Photon Geyser and Moongeist Beam, they only have 8 PP each, so maybe you run the Expanding Force just to be on the safer side, since you do have 16 PP on that instead. So just some food for thought. And the other thing too is you do get Earth Power on Dawn Wings, so that could be fairly respectable, since you could hit a lot of fire types for some big damage. Maybe you don't want to run the Meteor Beam, and then this does give you a means of hitting Incineroar for super effective damage to get around that, since a dark type attack coming from Incineroar could be really bad. And there's just that. And another note too, for the Terra Fairy, this would help you deal with Urshifu single strike, so you wouldn't have to worry about Wicked Blow just destroying you, or even Sucker Punch for that matter. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about some teammates that I think could be really good for Necrozma in any of its forms, or rather, some teammates that'll be good for Dawnwing, some that'll be good for Duskmane, and by extension, Base. So let's move on to that. Regardless of which form of Necrozma you're running, Psychic Terrain is going to be very, very valuable. And it doesn't matter if you're running male Indeedee or female Indeedee, both of which have their pros for sure. Male Indeedee here could be funny with a Choice Scarf and After You shenanigans. And the main reason why I say that is After You forces the target to move immediately after it. So what we can do here is we can slap a Timid Nature onto male Indeedee, which brings us up to 161 speed. And now if we have the Choice Scarf here, what that breaks down to with the 161 and a Choice Scarf together, we are going to be looking at a grand total of 241 speed, which means Indeedee is going to outspeed a lot of Pokemon. And if you wanted to, say, cheese out a Trick Room with any of these Necrozmas, you could click After You, target your Necrozma, and then Indeedee will force Necrozma to go before the other Pokemon, and it will ignore Trick Room's negative priority, which means we'll get the Trick Room up just instantaneously, which means you can then just switch the Indeedee out into a reliable partner for some bulk or some support, and Necrozma can start going for some big damage right there. If you're running Duskmane, you can click a Swords Dance the following turn, maybe switch in a Incineroar, for example, and then you can get the Intimidate drop into your opponent's Pokemon. You now have, well, you wouldn't really have the Fake Out pressure because of the Psychic Terrain, but the sentiment is there if the Psychic Terrain were about to expire, and then you just pivoted in Incineroar that way. You could have a Landorus Therian as well. Landorus Therian would also give you an Intimidate drop, and then you could have some Rock Slides go up to do some damage, or you could just immediately switch Indeedee back in, and then you could just reset your moves. Since you would have Psychic Terrain up on the field, hypothetically, you could just click the Expanding Force, or you could just let Indeedee go down as well as a sacrifice. You could have something like that with a male Indeedee. And something that's kind of funny is that Indeedee does get access to Skill Swap, and so abilities like Psychic Surge, when they get Skill Swapped onto another Pokemon, that reactivates them. So maybe your opponent thinks they're going to override your terrain by switching in either a Miraidon or a Rillaboom. You can click Skill Swap, take away something's ability, whether it be Necrozma's. Don't do that. But hypothetically speaking, you could take away Necrozma's ability and give it Psychic Surge, or you could take away one of your opponent's abilities, give them the Psychic Surge, they reactivate the Psychic Terrain as well. So there could be something like that, which would be just hilarious. And then with female Indeedee, you have the bulky redirection support role right here. And honestly, redirection support is going to be really nice for Necrozma, which is also why Clefairy and Maushold are the immediate two after female Indeedee. So thanks to female Indeedee having access to Trick Room, if you want to lead Indeedee next to a Necrozma, now your opponent has to try to figure out if it's Indeedee going for the Trick Room or if it's Necrozma going for the Trick Room. And since you just set Psychic Terrain with Indeedee's Psychic Surge, great. Now you can't get priorityed, which means even if your opponent, say, wanted to go for a Sucker Punch into Necrozma, thinking that it's Indeedee going for the Trick Room and Necrozma going for damage, they can't do that unless they get rid of the terrain first. So there is that. You can also have some nice helping hand support So maybe, joke's on your opponent, they think you're going for Trick Room with either of these Pokemon, but no, you go for the Helping Hand. Indeedee gives Necrozma a boost to its damaging move by 50%, and then bam, Sunsteel Strike, Moongeist Beam, Photon Geyser. The world is your oyster at that point for the damage potential. You can also slap a Terra Fairy on Indeedee too, and then that way, if your opponent thinks they're being cute with a Urshifu Single Strike, trying to just get rid of it with Wicked Blow, well, you could have the Indeedee just go Terra Fairy and redirect away that Surging Strikes, like throw heavy physical investment into it, and then say like maybe a Bold Nature on top of that, so that you have 177 HP and 128 defense, resisting a Dark type attack with Terra Fairy. That means you're not going to be taking a lot of damage, and plus you can have that Psychic Seed on the Indeedee so that Indeedee gets the special defense boost right there, and now you have a really bulky partner for Necrozma. Now, excuse me, one thing to keep in mind too is you still have the option for a fourth move right here. So a nice thing here is if you wanted to, you could run Alluring Voice, which is base 80 power, and if the opponent tried to set up in front of Necrozma and Alluring Voice connects with them, well, you have a guaranteed confusion rate right there. You could go for Dazzling Gleam for some Fairy type spread damage. You could run a Psychic type option, but honestly, the Fairy type move is probably better on female Indeedee, since that gives you a means of not being walled by Dark types. Or what you could do instead, if you wanted to, you could just bluff the idea of having a damaging move and then just have a fourth supportive move. Maybe take the Psychic Seed out, and then this way too, this might let your opponent think you're Focus Sash instead on the ladder. This doesn't really do you any good on an open team sheet format, but what you could do is pop a Mental Herb, and then this way too, now your opponent has to taunt you twice to be able to lock you out of your status moves. So now maybe you could have, say, the Heal Pulse right here. Maybe you're not running Moonlight or Morning Sun on Necrozma. Now you have the Heal Pulse. Now you're a guaranteed 50% restoration to the target. Now you would have to be a little bit careful when it comes to opposing redirection, say Follow Me or Rage Powder, but you could have the Heal Pulse. Or maybe you want to be brave and you don't want to run the Mental Herb, you can run the Safety Goggles, and this would keep you safe from Amoonguss redirecting away your attacks with, say, Rage Powder instead. So you could have that right there as a potential option. As far as Clefairy goes, it's great because you have Friend Guard, which this is also going to stack up with Mousehold, which is going to be nice. So Friend Guard will make it so that by default, you're only taking 3/4 of the damage from any other Pokemon's attacks for your partner right there. So Necrozma is going to get even bulkier. You can go for Life Dew or Heal Pulse to recover back some HP. Life Dew is a little bit less HP back than Heal Pulse, but it has the added bonus of not being able to be redirected by Follow Me, since it's targeting Clefairy and Clefairy's partner specifically. So Clefairy gets a little bit of HP back. Necrozma gets a little bit of HP back. I ran this with my Giratina in my Giratina battle video. It was really nice at the end of the day. And Clefairy is insanely slow, so if Necrozma goes for the Trick Room, Clefairy goes for Follow Me, you get the Trick Room up. Well, now you have After You. Clefairy has a base speed of 35, meaning if you have no speed investment and no speed IVs into it, you have a speed of 40. You are outspeeding Calyrex, Ice Rider, and Ursaluna Blood Moon under Trick Room with Clefairy this way. You click the After You into Necrozma. Necrozma will then go before them in Trick Room, and now you can do some major damage to either Blood Moon or Ice Rider. So that could be really nice. So you could use a combination of these 4 moves. Maybe you want to run Protect with Life Dew after you Follow Me. You could do something like that. You could run Moonblast just so that you're not completely taunt bait. And then that way too, Clefairy can also be bulkier thanks to the Eviolite, giving it a 50% boost to its special defense and its defense. So you do have that. But if you're not playing Trick Room and you're kind of playing more of a slow, bulky attacker outside of Trick Room, or if maybe you have Tailwind support, Mousehold might be your guy, or rather your fam right here, because Mousehold has access to Follow Me. It has great supportive options in the form of either Fake Tears or Tickle. Fake Tears is a -2 special defense drop right into your opponent, so this could be really great for base Necrozma or Dawnwings. Tickle, on the other hand, is it's basically an anti-bulk up right here because it's a -1 to the attack and defense stage right there, so Duskmane would greatly benefit from it. And then Melsold also gets beat up right here, so what you could potentially do is you could use beat up in a weakness policy on Necrozma. You hit the Necrozma, you activate the weakness policy, and then you can get a +2 attack and special attack right there. It might be a little bit brave to run beat up Mousehold next to Necrozma because Duskmane would have to run the weakness policy over a clear amulet to make that strategy work, but you could still do it. And if you did it with Dawnwings, well, maybe just terrestrialize into either a ghost or psychic type, so you're not doing 4 times super effective damage to yourself, because even though beat up's not the strongest move out there, the less damage you take on Dawnwings, the better. So you might want to just use your terrestrialization to drop the 4 times weakness into a 2 times weakness. But you could do that, and you could synergize beat up with, say, Terrakion. Terrakion has the Justified ability, and this would work for both Virizion and Cobalion as well. Justified makes it so that you get a +1 attack boost each time you get hit with a dark type move. If none of your Pokemon are fainted, beat up's going to be hitting you 4 times, so you could get a +4 boost into your attack right there, which means Terrakion is getting set up insanely fast. And with 129 attack maxed out on a neutral nature, you have 181 attack, and with max speed right here with a Jolly nature, you're hitting 176, so Terrakion would be fairly fast, and it could do some major damage with Rock Slide or Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword would be great since not only would it be boosted up, but it would also crack through your opponent's defensive boosts. So if your opponent's, say, running a body press set and they made the mistake of not becoming a ghost type, well, now you're just going to drop all of those defense boosts and just do some major damage to them. And to make things even funnier, you could even go Terra Ghost on Terrakion and run the weakness policy on Terrakion instead, and then you just go with the +6 immediately. And then as far as some other options go, Terrakion gets access to Poison Jab for dealing with fairy types. It gets Iron Head as well for fairies. You get access to High Horsepower, which would be great for electric types. Looking at you specifically, Miraidon, since you like to go Terra Electric, you could have a +4 High Horsepower to hit that thing for some major damage, especially too if Miraidon lets Terrakion get set up by Mousehold. Maybe Miraidon switches in on the turn, Mousehold sets up Terrakion, Mousehold redirects it away an attack, and then Terrakion just nails them with a High Horsepower. There could be that, or on the supportive role, since Terrakion is so much faster than Duskmane, you could run coaching on it. You have a means of giving the Duskmane a +1 attack and defense right there, meaning you could probably run a little bit more special defense investment into Duskmane's EVs, so you could boost up the physical side for Duskmane, and then Duskmane can just go wild there. Maybe Duskmane goes for a Trick Room, Terrakion sets them up with coaching, bam, you just switched from a fast mode to a slow mode, and now your Duskmane is going to do some major damage to things. So that could be really nice. And then looking at the Trick Room side of things, Hatterene could be a nice potential partner that's also an offensive sweeper as well. It gets access to Expanding Force, Dazzling Gleam, Trick Room. It could do a 3rd damaging move instead of Protect. Magic Bounce will reflect status moves back at the users, so that could be really nice. And you could have the Life Orb for some damage modifiers right there. So with base 136 special attack, Hatterene can do a lot of damage to things, and having Psychic Terrain on the field at the same time could be really nice. Now the 57 base HP, not really going to be doing you that many favors, but maybe you divvy it up between your defense, your HP, and your special attack. Maybe you run, say, a bold or modest nature. The bold wasn't really that much of a jump, so maybe we run a modest nature right here with the 188 EVs right there. We're at 198. You get the Trick Room up, you have the Life Orb. Expanding Force could hit things really hard. Dazzling Gleam can hit the dark types that would wall the Expanding Force. If you wanted to, you could run, say, Mystical Fire to keep some special attackers in line while having fire type damage for grass types or things that like to go Terra Grass. You could also have Dark Pulse for some general damage, and plus Dark type coverage is not the worst thing imaginable, especially since things like Shadow Rider do exist. And plus Hatterene also does get after you, so if you really needed to, you can get the Trick Room up, and then you can go for After You to benefit your Necrozma of choice. And the really, really good thing here is you are a base 29 speed. So with no speed IVs right here, you're hitting 34 speed on a modest nature. If you switched it to a quiet nature, you're hitting 30. You're outspeeding Amoonguss in Trick Room. That's wild, because you are literally outspeeding Amoonguss by exactly 1 point. Your psychic type damage would just destroy Amoonguss right there. So that could be very, very helpful and valuable to be able to get an Amoonguss off of your opponent's team, especially if they are running a Trick Room mode of their own. Torkoal could be a great idea as well, because Eruption in Trick Room is incredibly strong. If you wanted to, you could run a Charcoal on it so that your fire type attacks get a 20% boost in power. You can double up your stab with Terra Fire. The Drought will naturally give the Sun to the field, which means Necrozma, if it's running Morning Sun or Moonlight, they get more HP back. You get a bonus damage modifier on your fire type attacks. You have the Eruption, which is base 50 power when you're at full HP. If you wanted to have a single target fire option, you could have the Weather Ball. This would double in power, turn into a fire type attack in the sun. And if your opponent is trying to be a little bit clever and bringing other forms of weather, well, Weather Ball will just change its typing to and still have the double power, so it would go from 50 to 100. In the rain, it's a 100 water type attack that's getting a rain modifier. In the sand, it's a 100 power rock type move. In the snow, it's a 100 power ice type move, so that could be nice. Helping Hand could be used to support your partners, and Earth Power is just nice coverage there. And if you didn't want to run Earth Power instead, you could run Yawn. Yawn puts your opponent on a timer right there, and it also makes them have a painful choice of whether or not they want to switch out their Pokemon or go to sleep. So there is that. And then Torkoal also gets Clear Smog. Clear Smog resets the target's stat boosts and drops to 0. So if your opponent is setting up, or maybe you say they have a Glacial Lance spamming Calyrex that might be at +2 because they took out 2 of your Pokemon, Trick Room's on the field. Torkoal's slower than Calyrex. You hit them with a Clear Smog, their attack boosts are gone. It's that easy. Or if your opponent goes for a nasty plot on a Shadow Rider, you set up Trick Room because you managed to survive, you Clear Smog them, bye-bye nasty plot. Those are just some examples, and plus Dondozo. We all know what Dondozo does when it gets that Tatsugiri, and it gets that +2 into every single stat while having the Unaware ability. Clear Smog. Clear Smog fixes that while also doing damage to non-Terra Steel Dondozo. So you could have that as an option. And plus, it doesn't worry about accuracy. It just bypasses accuracy, so you could have that. Another thing, too, is Amoonguss and Brute Bonnet both could be great additions to having Spore shenanigans on your side of the field. And the main thing here, too, is while Amoonguss is a little bit slower, Brute Bonnet does have a little bit more firepower, and it is a physical attacker. So what you could hypothetically do is you could have the Brute Bonnet with a Dawn Wings, and then you have a means of physical pressure next to your Dawn Wings while Trick Room is on the field, and now your opponent has to deal with either Sucker Punch or potentially a Loaded Dice boosted Bullet Seed, or they have to play around Rage Powder or Spore from Brute Bonnet. Or on Amoonguss' side, you could have Pollen Puff to heal up your partner's HP right there while having Rage Powder and Spore support as well. But one thing that's going to be very nice is the ability to remove terrain. Now, as I mentioned, psychic terrain could be really, really nice for Necrozma, but electric terrain or grassy terrain could be a little bit of a problem for Necrozma. Electric terrain, especially if you're playing Trick Room with Amoonguss, could hinder your momentum since electric terrain prevents any grounded Pokemon from being put to sleep. But what you could do is you could run an Ice Spinner user. And if you were maybe, say, playing Necrozma, Torkoal, Amoonguss on your team, you could look into either Lilligant or Chen Pao. Lilligant gets access to Ice Spinner, which is really nice for a grass type to have ice type coverage, since that not only threatens other grass types, but it can also destroy the terrain. Dragonite is still fairly popular as well if they don't terrestrialize and they keep their dragon typing, or if they already burned their Terra, well, now you have a 4 times means of super effective damage. Or maybe say your opponent has, like, say, Roaring Moon. If they Terra into a flying type, they're still taking super effective ice type damage, so you do have that. Close combat is great since it's absolutely strong fighting type damage right there, even at -1 attack. Lilligant could probably do a good number 2 Incineroar. You could also slap a Covert Cloak on the Lilligant, and then that way you don't have to worry about Fake Out locking you out. Or if you don't want to run Fake Out and you want to run a Covert Cloak, you could run a Focus Sash instead and then switch to Terra Ghost. And then this way too, what you could do is you could have some fun with After You shenanigans. And what you can do here is, instead of having the Charcoal on Torkoal to really mess with your opponents, you could run the Covert Cloak here. And now this way, you don't have to worry about your opponent trying to play around your After You Eruption with Lilligant Torkoal by going for Fake Out into Torkoal instead of Lilligant, because they think the Covert Cloak is on Lilligant. You pop the Terra Ghost, Lilligant becomes immune to Fake Out from the Ghost typing. You have the Covert Cloak on Torkoal. While Fake Out would do a little bit of damage to you, Eruption would still do a lot of power right here. And by having the Terra Ghost Lilligant be immune to Fake Out, you don't have to worry about the priority getting around Chlorophyll, doubling your speed. Hisuian Lilligant has a base 105 speed. Without any investment, that's 125 right there. You double that in the sun thanks to Chlorophyll. Well, now you're going up to 250 without any investment right there. So you could actually run, say, an Adamant Nature. Maybe you bring your speed up to about 100 and... actually, you hit 157 with max speed right here on an Adamant Nature. I was originally going to say if you brought your speed up to 155, but you know what, 157 works even better because this gets you around any base 90 Pokemon that's running Tailwind in their favor. Like, say, maybe your opponent has Tornadus Kyogre. The 157 speed, if you have the sun on the field, you're outspeeding the Kyogre still, you can do some major damage to them with either, say, Leaf Blade if they don't Terra, Ice Spitter if they Terra Grass. Close Combat just does a lot of damage, so you could have that. And then that puts them into a weird position where if they don't have their Rain from Drizzle, then Torn would have to either Rain Dance or Tailwind, which means you can still get the jump on Kyogre that way. Thanks to your sun, because Torkoal is naturally slower than Kyogre to begin with, it would keep the weather. So you could do a lot of damage with a base 105 attack with max investment at 172. Or you click the After You and then Torkoal goes for Eruption. So that's the main point about Hisuian Lilligant right there. And then finally, Chen Pao could be really nice too, since it can remove the terrain for a team, especially that wants to run Spore. And Sucker Punch could be really nice. Like, maybe you have to remove your own Psychic terrain. You could go for an Ice Spinner, remove the Psychic terrain with Ice Spinner. Now you can Sucker Punch things. And when I mentioned Grassy Glide being a little bit of a problem for Necrozma, that could be a bit more of a problem for Dawn Wings, because while Dusk Mane would naturally resist priority Grassy Glide off grassy terrain, Dawn Wings wouldn't, and Dawn Wings has the lower defense out of the two of them, so you could remove the grassy terrain, which would slow down Rillabooms, and then that way you don't have to worry about them having priority damage in Trick Room for your Necrozma. or you don't have to worry about them just being able to pick off your Necrozma with a Grassy Glide, and you have your Chen Pao on the field. So that's just some food for thought. Ice Spinner is really nice here too with the Sucker Punch. As I mentioned, with Terrakion and Sacred Sword, you can just bypass any defensive boosts, and Chen Pao's Sword of Ruin will also lower the defense of everything on the field. While that's a little bit of a detriment to Dawnwings, this helps out Duskbane really nicely, since Duskbane wants to run physical damage anyways. So having Sword of Ruin with Duskbane could be really nice, especially if you're running, say, a Dragon Dance or Sword Stance set. So that's a lot to talk about and a lot to take in, so I think we're going to cut it there, guys. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about Necrozma Duskbane, and Necrozma Dawnwings. Like I said, these were the big ticket Pokemon that came out from GoFest, and I got a lot of them on my Pokemon Go. So I'm going to transfer them up to Scarlet and Violet, and I'm definitely going to be using Necrozma in the near future, which I am very excited to be looking into. So hopefully you guys are excited to see them hit some of them, or hopefully you guys are excited to see them hit some teams. There we go. Finally got it right there. Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. See you next time.